What is up, guys? Jason here, and I am bringing you another historical deck profile. In the last video, we talked about the winning deck list for the North American Continental Championships 14 and under age division. Now we are going to the 15 and over age division. Now this deck was won by Tom Kapoor. In my net decking, I've actually come across Tom Kapoor's name a couple of times. Seems like he was a very effective practitioner of RUB control from back in the day. And he's actually the reason or the person who's inspired a lot of my lists, and his lists are what I based a lot of my lists from, and that I tried to, basically build upon his work. This is very different to the deck that we last covered. Now that we're dealing with older players, they are more open to, like, I guess, more complex strategies rather than the basic, I'm just going to kill my opponent as fast as I can. And I think a lot of these cards you're going to be familiar with, but I'll just give you guys some more context regarding this list. It does go up to the 8th set, Epic Dragons of Hyper Chaos, just like in the last video. I'm not too sure if I mentioned it there, but yeah, so let's get into it. We are going to start things off with 4 Alcoholcus. I did not see this coming, just there for the pluses really. Summon him, draw a card, can't complain. And we're going to quickly move on to the big baddie of the deck. We've got 2 Bazagazil Dragons, speed attacker, double breaker, can attack untapped creatures, but at the end of the turn he returns to your hand. In a way, this could be a great effect, or this could be a drawback too. It's great because I think there's a lot more field destruction that exists within the game of Duel Masters than there does hand destruction. I also think that against many kinds of decks, he will be safer in your hand. I think some decks are just not equipped to deal with cards like Baz and Pyro, but then Baz, takes that a notch up. For example, Peter Sampai's deck, I don't think would deal with Bazagazil Dragon very well. You would have to break into Natural Snare with Baz in order to get rid of him. But other than that, you don't really have any answers. Another way you can look at Baz, as I might have mentioned in a previous video, is that he's an 8 mana reusable Death Smoke. So I think he's really good for controlling the board, and he's a great addition to any control deck. Moving on, we've got 4 Bloody Skeeto, another card that, it's a mainstay in these kinds of decks. He's just a great blocker. He's playing 4 of them. I suppose the water section is quite chunky. Yep, 20 cards in the water section. I don't think I would go any more than that. So, putting darkness blockers makes a lot of sense to me. We've got 4 Corile, 3 Emerald, and 3 Illusionary Merfolk, so he's playing the 4-3-3 Merfolk line. I guess he has opted for a more late-game approach, choosing to forego the 4th copy of Emerald, perhaps for another Corile, just because, it's more important for him to slow down his opponents, rather than to, actually have a board early in the game, which is fair enough. 4 Locomotiver, so shield trigger when you put this into the battle zone, discard a card at random, so he's another mainstay in darkness decks really. I think he's a much more worthwhile inclusion than than Ghost Touch, should you opt to only play one of them. Also got 3 Thrashcrawler, who I think is the heart and soul of the deck. When you put this creature into the battle zone, return a card from your mana zone to your hand. So this was actually the deck that made me savvy to the whole Charger Thrashcrawler loop mechanic. If we take a look at this card, I'm just going to gloss over APOC right here. We've got 2 Corpse Chargers. Put a creature in your graveyard to your hand, but after you cast this spell, put it into your mana zone instead of your graveyard, which I think is pretty good. Now, prior to Chargers being released in DM8 Epic Dragons, the only true form of mana acceleration would have existed in nature through Bronze Arm Tribe, through Fairy Life, things of that nature. However, Chargers are sort of an option that give decks that don't include nature a form of mana acceleration. I think that's very valuable, and I think personally they were a good addition to the game. Now, naturally, mana acceleration is a powerful effect, so that is why you see these Chargers costing a fair bit more. Like, as you can see here, Corpse Charger costs 4 mana, which is double the cost of Dark Reversal, which effectively does the same thing, and is also a shield trigger. So the interaction between Corpse Charger and Thrashcrawler is basically you play Corpse Charger, you can get a Thrashcrawler back. When you play a Thrashcrawler, you can get Corpse Charger back from your mana zone, so on and so forth. And also with Volcano Charger, if you play Thrashcrawler, you can reuse a Volcano Charger, which is kind of neat. Volcano Charger is the 2k or less destruction spell. We are opting to drop Crimson Hammer and Phantom Dragon's Flame entirely, destroy one of your opponent's creatures that has power 2k or less. pretty good. He plays 4 copies, which might seem a bit excessive, but when I initially tested this exact list, I found that it was very, very, very important. The deck, basically being able to play Volcano Charger makes and breaks the deck. If you can play it early, then you can kind of get rolling. If you can't play it early, then you're in a bit of a pickle, really, because you just fall behind. Some other fire spells, we've got 2 Apocalypse Vice, which I think is one of the most powerful and versatile fire spells in the game. Destroy any number of your opponent's creatures that have total power 8k or less. So that means you are able to kill 1 creature with power 8k, or you can kill 8 creatures with power 1k, or anything in between. Apocalypse Vice pretty good, and it's a natural fit in control decks which go into the late game and, want to control the board. I quite like the flavor text here. I've invented a fun new weight loss machine. It's guaranteed to make you thinner or your money back. And Rikaboo is the creator, so not only did he create a screwdriver that kills blockers, he created an exercise machine that kills goats by the looks of it. Now, we've got 3 Energy Stream, draw 2 cards. That's fair enough. We've got some, a lot of draw power in here. We've got 4 Aqua Hulkus, 3 Illusionary Merfolk, 3 Energy Stream. Looks good to me. We've also got 2 Lost Soul. Your opponent discards all cards from his hand. That's pretty good. As I always say, very important for control. You'll also notice this deck does not have Bolmedius, so after you have a big turn breaking a lot of shields, if your opponent's not able to play out his hand, boom, you just hit him with this. We've also got 4 Searing Wave, destroy all your opponent's creatures with power 3k or less. I think it's a lot more effective than Burst Shot in terms of control, and you can play it a lot more quickly and earlier than Apocalypse Vice. I think it's a very good card. You choose one of your shields and put it into the graveyard. That's an obvious drawback, but if we notice, there aren't actually that many shield triggers in this deck. We've got the 4 Terra Pits naturally. Okay, so that's the only spell shield trigger. And then we've got 4 Locos, and yeah, that's all. So, seems reasonable to me. Righty-ho, so in terms of distribution, this one is getting a lot better than the previous decks that we've looked at. I think the fire section might look a tad thin, but I guess 12 is sort of passable. I would be much more comfortable with like 14, but that's fine. He won a tournament after all. And yeah. Darkness 16, Water 20, I'm happy with that. As you can see here, this deck is a very slow deck. Not too many cards you can play in the early game. However, stuff starts happening on turn 4. The thing is, though, stuff doesn't actually happen on turn 4. Because if you think about it, the only level 4 cards that you're going to be playing on turn 4 are Locomotiver and Volcano Charger. Because Corpse Charger seems like a late game card to me. You use it to retrieve something when you need it, just because paying 4 mana to get a creature, paying all of your mana to get a creature back isn't really the best use in my opinion. And Thrash Crawler, well, we've talked about how slow this deck can be in terms of mana acceleration. If you don't play Volcano Charger, you're not accelerating mana. And in the early turns, you don't really want to be playing Thrash on turn 4 because you set yourself back a mana. So the following turn, you're still sitting at 4 mana. And most of your cards are rather expensive. 5, 6, 7, 8. Yikes. For the record, all of the changes I would have wanted to make are reflected in the Merfolk Control deck profile video, but I think it's a bit of a cop-out to go through a historical deck profile and not have an in-depth discussion on potential changes. So here we are. I can see that Baz is the only big bad boss of the deck, so I'm going to build it around him while also trying to improve the mana curve. The first change, and also the easiest change, is to remove 1 Loco and 1 Bloody Skeeto for 2 Cranium Clamps. This card is just too good, and I have no idea why our resident featured player did not choose to run it. We know it's available because Cranium Clamp came out in the same set as Volcano Charger and Corpse Charger, so maybe it was just an oversight by him, I don't know. But this card is just too good. Nothing against the other 2 cards, I just really had to make space for Cranium Clamp and didn't want to make cuts in the fire section, and it was hard to remove cards from the water section, so it just had to come from the dark section. If you really like Cranium Clamp, I actually wouldn't be against removing Lost Soul, and then you could run like 4 Cranium Clamp, but for now I think 2 is fine. I think Lost Soul still has a place despite the existence of Cranium Clamp. The next change is to replace 2 Apocalypse Vice and 1 Searing Wave and 1 Volcano Charger, so we're taking 4 cards out, with 3 copies of Crimson Hammer and an extra copy of Baz. Yes, I realize I did that in the wrong order, but oh well. I think the goal should be able to always see Baz, hence the extra copy. We always want to be able to see him, because that increases our number of outs. Having Baz in the graveyard means we essentially have 4 outs to him, 2 more Baz in the deck, and 2 Corpse Chargers. If we have Baz in mana, we have 5 copies of him, because we have 2 more in the deck and 3 copies of Thrashcrawler. I thought Apocalypse Device could go because we want to focus the deck on Baz, and they come out at around the same time. Using my faulty logic, if you can manage your opponent's board throughout the game, you won't really need to rely on APOC for the big board clear. Crimson Hammer, or even Phantom Dragon's Flame to be honest, are good for early game clearing, especially because this deck isn't able to do a whole lot on turns 2 and 3. And then after that, you can curve into Volcano Charger, Corile, Searing Wave, Terrapid. So when you hit the late game, you really shouldn't need the APOC board clear. The last change is to replace 1 copy of Aqua Hulkus with Emerald, a bit of a small change, but I want to be increasing our outs to turn 5 Merfolk. As we discussed earlier, I just want to keep our removal cards with the removal of APOC, so I wanted to keep the 4th copy of Corile in there. I played this deck card for card and found you could have very clunky hands because of all the expensive cards, and you sometimes have to bank on your opponent breaking into Terrapit and hitting a draw card on turn 3 to stabilize. So even though it's a good deck, it was a great deck for its time and still sort of holds up, not necessarily the best way to play. If you have some sort of arbitrary limit like me and say, you know what, we can go up to 50 cards, I think Flood Valve and Dark Reversal are worth considering too. Just because of the Baz logic I mentioned, these act as extra outs to Baz, and they're also very cheap. As always, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you learned something new, and I always look forward to bringing you new content in the future. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys later.